All right, Shalom, Yasharala, Shalom, giving all praises, honor, and glory to our power, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shah, Bahasham, Rachak, Wadash, to the honors, to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings to the hopeful elect of the tabernacles of David, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, whomever you may be, wherever you may be, to you I say, Shalom, Yasharala, Shalom. All right, so we're going to start a little series here of, very important lessons given. The overall of past, present, and future, especially dealing with future, because we are those living in that future. We were our forefathers and foremothers of the ancient days reincarnated now here in the future time. Okay, and so what we're going to get into is very important because this was a general statement made here. All right, prophecy more so, not just statement, is a general prophecy made about the 12 tribes of Israel. All right, coming from their father. All right. Also, now this is one aspect of identifying who we are, because who we say we are, we believe that wholeheartedly through faith. We don't care what anyone else thinks, says, or believes. Right. It's about what the scriptures say, and the Holy Spirit has been given unto us as a gift for us to understand these things and believe them as well. Okay, so this is one aspect of identifying who we are in these latter days. Also, when you go into the curses, which you can read about the curses in Leviticus 26, as well as Deuteronomy chapter 28, that's another angle that you can come from to identify who the Lord's people are, because they will be under the curses. So the things that befall those people, not just one or two of those, everything in that chapter pertaining to the curses befall our people, okay, and no one else. So that's another identifying factor of who we are in these latter days. But here's another angle that's not often talked about, because brothers often go to Deuteronomy 28 chapter, right? But this is not often talked about. But this was, we can really just get into it at this point. As a matter of fact, before I go, bear with me, I'm gonna grab my glasses. All right, we ready to go. Let me get a sip. Okay, so we're gonna start here, and as I mentioned before, we're gonna tackle this in increments. It's very important to do so because we want to get as much out of it as possible. All right, so some of these are more shorter. So I don't know. We'll have to fly that cherry when we get to it, or as they say in the world, cross that bridge when we get to it, right? So depending on those that are shorter, we may do them at the same time. But I'm going to try to do these one by one, especially starting with Reuben. All right, because there's a little bit we can go into with Reuben. So yeah, let's just get it started. So Genesis 49 and 1, and it says what Israel's prophecy concerning his sons. So Yaquab or Yasharallah, his name was changed to, because Israel in the Hebrew is Yasharallah. Yah means he, Shar means prince, Allah meaning God or power. All right, prince of God, prince of power. All right, he prince power, he prince God. Okay, so prophecy concerning his sons. All right, which prophecy means to speak or to say before. So this is a foretelling of future events, but in particular, this is a foretelling of future events that would identify what his sons would go through, which is also an identifying factor of who those particular people are today. So verse 1 says, and Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together, all right, and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. All right, and the key thing from verse 1 and verse 2 is where it says in the last days. Okay, in the last days. And real quick, I actually want to get a couple here. I'm gonna have to pull up a extra book here to grab the apocrypha real quick. And well, I guess I use that one because I just want to get over to where are you? Here it is, under my thumb. I couldn't see it. All right, so Baruch. I'm going to go to chapter 2 real quick. So Baruch 2 and 29. So it says, if you would not hear my voice, surely this very great multitude shall be turned into a small number among the nations where I will scatter them. That's very important. All right, when you're dealing with the nation of Israel. All right. Know for a certainty, whether it be America or anywhere else in the earth, that you will find the nation of Israel everywhere, because that is part of the prophecies that we will be scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, all the way from the Old Testament as well as to the New Testament. All right, Israel will be scattered, and that's where we are today. All right, which is why you can find the nation of Israel everywhere. So it says, "For I knew that they would not hear me, because it is a stiff-necked people. But in the land of their captivities they shall remember themselves." So we're waking up to the fact that we're not blacks and Mexicans and Puerto Ricans, that we're the true Israelites. All right, from the 12 sons of Jacob. Okay, so we're not going on with the lies anymore, because the Spirit has quickened us to this understanding. All right. It says, but in the land of their captivities, they shall remember themselves. So, as you know, the apostles constantly talk about, all right, there's no need for travel. Okay. No need for jet setting. All right. The internet does the heavy lifting. Okay. When we put up these lessons, they go out throughout the four corners of the earth. That's why, I say it in a joking manner, but I'm actually serious when I speak about the Russian guy, speaking about Mother Russia. She's not my mother anymore. Where there's Israelites that live in Russia. Okay, and they look just like the Russian people, all right, but they're not Russians. Okay, they're Russian by how they're being named, all right, just like they would call me an American, but I'm not actually an American. I'm an Israelite. Those people are not Russians. They're Israelites. Okay, we talk about, the joke with the bowl cut China kid, but he's actually out there somewhere. Okay, he's out there somewhere. All right, we speak about the Japanese girl, well, she's out there somewhere. Okay, so on and so forth. You have Israelites that are all over the earth in every country, man, and we're going to get gathered from the four corners of the earth as well as the islands of the sea upon the Lord's return. All right, which is spoken about in one place, anyways, Isaiah chapter 11. So it says, and shall know. Let me read this again. It says, but in the land of their captivity they shall remember themselves. All right. This is why we have these identifying factors in the scriptures, the curses, as well as the chapters that we're going into now. Okay. So it says, and shall know that I am the Lord their power. All right. For I will give them in heart and ears to hear, which is what? Knowledge, wisdom, and understanding through the quickening of our spirit. All right. Scriptures talk about how I will stir up your pure minds by way of remembrance. Okay. It says, and they shall praise me in the land of the captivity and think upon my name. So how can we praise the name of Yahweh if we don't have the name of Yahweh? Okay. So any camp telling you out there that we don't have the Lord's name, they are lying to you, because we do have the name of the Lord, and we are commanded to call upon that name in our praising, in our rejoicing, and in our prayers. Okay. So it says, and they shall praise me in the land of their captivity and think upon my name and return from their stiff neck, right, which is coming out of the ways of the world, okay, and putting on the new man or the new woman, right, in Yahushua, a spiritual circumcision. For they shall remember the way of their fathers, you see, a more righteous way, a way that was more pleasing to the Heavenly Father, okay, which sin before the Lord, okay, and also bringing the remembrance of our forefathers and how they went off, so that we don't continue to make the same mistakes that they made, right, in the past, okay. And I'll just pull it up from here, then we'll go back to our other book. So I want to go over here because we mentioned this anyways. Deuteronomy chapter 28, right? Just sticking on the scattering real quick, all right, just to set this, okay, because you have to understand that we're everywhere, and then we're going to take travels by personal travels, all right, by fleeing from certain events, and as well as being taken into slave trades, all right, things of that nature, okay. So Deuteronomy 28:63, and it shall come to pass that as Yahweh rejoice over you to do you good and to multiply you, so Yahweh will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to not meaning nothing, and ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. All right, our homeland. Okay, it says, and Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people. See, this is going into the same thing in a whole different chapter, and this particular chapter is about the curses that will fall upon our people, which is how you identify, because it says that it will be a sign upon us and our children for generations to come. It says, from I will, and Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And this is a very important scripture coming up later with dealing with some of those other tribes, all right, especially like when you're dealing like with Ephraim or someone like that. Okay, but all the tribes, Ephraim and Judah mainly, really, but all the tribes, went off on something, but especially Ephraim and Judah, with the so-called white Jesus or with Allah or something else, right? So it says, and among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But Yahweh shall give thee there a trembling heart, and failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind, and thy life. Well, we can start right there, because I wanted that was the point right there, 64 to 64, or 63 to 65. And among these nations, because I was just talking about the scattering, shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But Yahweh shall give thee there a trembling heart, and failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind. All right, so yeah. So if we go back over here, all right, to our blue, okay, and we can go back and move forward. And we read it again. It says, and Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. All right. And the first son, all right, which is actually the firstborn son, okay, is Reuben, okay, which the word Reuben, all right, in the Hebrew is RAAWABAN, okay. There it is right there, RAAWABAN, okay, RAAWABAN, which comes from what the word here, you see in the red, ban, which means son. Bun or bun, all right, means son, okay. So also symbolizing like grandson or something, but specific son. And you have Ra'ah, which goes into to see or to perceive or something like that. Let me see, because I actually use that word in one of my prayers. All right, yeah, to see, to look at, inspect, perceive, consider, and I use it in the form of consider. All right, but yeah, to consider, to see, perceive, have vision, look, regard. I'm just trying to point out some of the ones that are not the same over and over. Learn about, see after, observe, watch, look upon, find out, look, discern, give attention to, distinguish, look at, gaze at, okay? So you get the point there, all right? So yeah, to look at, inspect, perceive, consider, and then bond means son, okay? Son, grandson, child, member of a group, all right? Son, male child, okay? So, and here's again, Ra'awaban. So Ra'awaban meaning behold a son, all right? Like perceive, see, behold, all right? A son, okay? Behold a son. Ra'awaban, all right, is the name, okay? And this tribe, Reuben, or in the Hebrew, Ra'awaban, are the so-called Seminole Indians, right? Which that word actually goes into meaning like wild or untamed, okay? Seminole, okay? Wild or untamed. So Reuben or Ra'awaban, right, meaning behold a son, okay? So it says the eldest son of Jacob by Leah, all right? The tribe descended from Reuben because Reuben is the head of that particular tribe, and everyone under him are the so-called Reubenites, or the Raban, those of Ra'awaban, all right? And then it says the territory inhabited by the tribe of Reuben, which, if you're going to look up an ancient map of Israel, the territories that were split up, you can find Reuben there if you care to pull up a map and check that out. All right. So as we go back here, so it says, Reuben, thou art my firstborn, and that's also important to understand too. Firstborn. All right. The word there is bakawar, right? Bakawar, right there. So it says firstborn, firstling, right, of men and women. In particular, we're talking about of men, of firstborn children, all right? And so Reuben, being the firstborn, would have the right, as firstborn, okay? But that was stricken from him as we continue reading on, all right? So Reuben, Ra'awaban, thou art my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, okay? So it says my might in the beginning of my strength, because he's the firstborn, and also which something we could talk about again in a second, but they were also a warrior like tribe of people, okay? So it says my might and the beginning, all right, my might, because he was the firstborn, and the beginning of my strength, okay? It says the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power, right? And when you kind of pull up pictures and stuff like that, like how they carry themselves, and kind of looks like, highlight, royal like manner or type fashion. Okay. And have a certain structure to themselves and how they carry themselves. All right. And as well as how they dress. It's very beautiful, very vibrant, very colorful. Okay. And like the thumbnail. Okay. The thumbnail. All right. That was from one of their events. Okay. So you see this very regal, royal like, attire, dressed in a certain, a certain manner, a certain fashion, which also was, by animal skins. And then, you naturally see the feathers with the so-called Native American tribes and stuff like that. And, face paint, of course, but that's not part of our customs as Israelites. But, that was a certain thing with them. Okay. Yeah. So you see them, it's like it says here, the beginning of my strength and the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. Okay, so yeah, how they carry themselves, how they dress, very vibrant, very colorful, and as all the tribes are, very lively people. Okay, but they are also, like a warrior race. They were a warrior tribe, all right? If I'm correct. It mentions them, like in times of war. All right, it mentions them in two other tribes, and if I'm correct, Reuben was one of those that were mentioned because they were, warrior tribesmen. Okay, um, I'm not sure if it was them or another tribe, but it talks about teaching their sons the bow. I almost said that was Judah, but it could have been Reuben. But I can't remember where the scripture is, so we're not going to hang on it. But something about teaching their sons to learn the way of the bow, something like that. And if you care to try to search that out or which tribe that was. I don't want to go too far off. Well, I guess I could maybe. I'm not sure if we'll find it because the way it's worded. So I don't really know how it's worded. Their sons' use of bow. I don't know. Let me just try that. Yeah. Maybe I'm probably not gonna find it in the blue letter. Maybe just say put the bow, possibly. Yeah. So I figured that much. But I do remember one of those tribes. All right. Uh, in specifics, talking about teaching, the children about the bow. Not the rainbow here. Let's see what by book. Leviticus. Nope. So they're going into the word bow, not bow. I want bow like bow and arrow. Um oh, here it is. Is that it? Aha ha. Okay. The water Yahweh Shah. Let me see if I can find which one that was. David lamented with his lamentation with Saul, son of Jonathan. Also, he bade them teach the children of Judah. Okay, so I was right. I knew it was Reuben or Judah, so I was right. It was Judah, all right? Also, he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher, which any book of Jasher out there today is not the real book of Jasher, so don't get carried away with that, all right? And you get bugged out. But beautiful, all right? So we were right about that. I knew it was either Judah or Reuben, and it was Judah, okay? So bam. All right, so we don't have to actually hang on that. So the Wadi Habashim Shah that we found that one. But it says, Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. As a matter of fact, let's get the word dignity, excuse me. Sha'af, elevation, exaltation, dignity, swelling, uprising, dignity, exaltation, loftiness. All right. So yeah, to lift, bear up, carry, take. And if I'm correct, is that the name of Seth? All right. Yeah, Seth. Is it? I'm not sure. I'm for sure. But it might be the same name of Seth, one of Adam's sons. Uh, Let me see here. Seth. Okay, Shaf. Close. All right. Shaf. And that's Sha'af. All right. Sha'af. But Sha'af meaning elevation, exaltation, dignity, swelling, uprising. Right. So yeah, if we even get the word excellency, Yathar. All right. The word is Yathar. Remainder, excess, rest, remnant, excellence. That's just straightforward excellence. All right. excess abundantly. Look, ooh, there you go. Look, superiority, excellency. See? See what else it goes back to. To be left over, remain over, leave. Yeah, and as we continue on, all right, it talks about them fighting against the Edomites, okay, Esau. So it says unstable as water. All right. Why does it say unstable as water? Because they were a nomadic people. Okay. And actually the word in the Greek, there's the word nomas, all right, or nomas, however you pronounce it, Nomas, which in the Greek, all right, that word nomas actually means roaming in search of pasture, all right, and that's what they used to do. They would roam from place to place, all right, because nomad is basically the person that would not stay very long in one particular place. So they would roam from place to place, searching for pasture for their cattle and themselves, but also beginning in as we get down to it, those wars against Esau. So they were also moving, okay, because of the wars against Esau. But yeah, on the other side, they will be nomadic because of moving place to place, finding pasture for their cattle, and land for them to live on, which in a sense makes them automatically. I don't know if they were doing it subconsciously or consciously, but which even though they were not in their own land, but they were still honoring the land Sabbath, where you actually have the land rest. So them moving from place to place, they're not working the land to death, and when they would take down animals, they made use of it. Instead, it's like Esau, who would do things for sport. He would kill for sport, okay? Like with the what was the buffalo, okay? They were killing off the buffalo. They were killing for sport, or they would kill for a certain thing but never actually make use of the whole carcass of the animal. Oh, so they were just mindlessly and uselessly killing off. All right. But the tribes, when they would do these things, they were doing it for a reason. They wouldn't just go out and just, oh, let's go, because we so skilled at bow, we're going to shoot deer today. Okay, no, man. They didn't just go out just to kill animals for sake of killing them. All right. And also, another thing with the Native American tribes, especially with like Gad, you will see they will highly respect the animals. Now, to a certain level, Gad was going off on that, but because they would have like talk about spiritual animals and stuff like that. They'll also sometimes be named after animals, running bull or desert fox or something like that. All right, so they went a little bit too far with it, but you get the point because of the curses and prophecies and things of that nature. But yeah, but us as Israelite people, we naturally are one in tune with the animals and the earth and the plants, the trees and things of that nature. And, and we like to be at peace with these things. But because of Esau and time progressing, the earth is adverse to the people. All right. And vice versa. All right. Especially when you're dealing with Esau. So it says unstable as water. All right. Because they will migrate from place to place because they were nomadic people. Okay. And it says, thou shalt not excel. Why is that? Because going into those the wars with Esau, okay, they will ultimately, to fulfill prophecy, they will lose, okay, against Esau, okay. But what started that? All right, the next scripture explains why they're not going to excel. It says, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, then the foulest thou it, he went up to my couch, okay. Um, But before we move on, let's actually deal with that, okay? Because it says unstable as water, all right? Because they were nomadic people. It says thou should not excel, and the reason behind that because of the wars with Esau. And before we get into talking about that, I want to grab Deuteronomy. All right, just to point some other things out that are important. Deuteronomy 33:6. It says, let Reuben live and not die, and let not his men be few. Okay, because once again, to fulfill prophecy, Esau eventually overcame Reuben because they gave up a hell of a fight, right? Beginning with the guerrilla warfare and stuff like that. Okay, Esau couldn't deal with it. Okay, so they would like do things like attack, like I don't want to say neutral if they were on Esau's side or whatever, but when I say neutral, I mean like those that were not even fighting, going to villages, where women, children, other elderly people or may have been, all right, and would attack and burn down and rape or whatever, to these different villages, right, to draw Reuben out, all right, because of the guerrilla warfare. Esau couldn't handle that, okay? That's where he got guerrilla warfare from. He stole that from Reuben, from RAAWABAN, right? So it says, let Reuben live and not die, and let not his men be few. It says, and this is the blessing of Judah. And he said, hear Yahweh, the voice of Judah, and bring him unto his people. Because back then what you had was runaway slaves, all right? Tribe of Judah, so-called Negroes, runaway slaves that would come down south and link up, all right, with these other Israelite tribes, or this other Israelite tribe in particular, talking about Reuben. And so Reuben, would treat them as normal, as equal, okay? And they would allow them, to hide out amongst them and give them protection, all right? Judah built settlements. They started to give Judah their wives and start to marry amongst them. Okay. Judah had skill of working the land. All right. Unfortunately, some of that skill was only put to use through the slave, plantations, things of that nature. But Judah made use of that, his use of knowledge of the land and working the fields to help out, Reuben. All right. Where they would, get exchange of crops and stuff like that. And we talked about the marrying the women, protection. Okay, and and then also where you get the term so-called black Seminole, okay, because Judah and Reuben were living peaceful amongst one another against Esau, okay. So it says, hear Yahweh the voice of Judah, and bring him unto his people. Let his hands be sufficient, all right. And when you get the word sufficient, word is rob, okay, the word is rob. It says much, many, great, okay, abounding in, abundant, enough, strong, great, greater than, much, exceedingly, captain, chief. All right, yeah. And once again, what we just talked about. All right, Judah will come and be helpful, all right, to Reuben, all right, in exchange for certain things and protection, and to hide out, live amongst them, and so on and so forth. Okay. So it says, bring him unto his people, which is talking about Reuben. Let Judah bring him unto his people. Let his hands be sufficient for him. So the help that they were able to supply Reuben with, all right, so they would help one to another. It says, and be thou in help to him from his enemies, because Judah was running from Esau, all right. And Reuben also had troubles with Esau, which we're about to read about in the Seminole Wars, okay? The 3 Seminole Wars, okay? And so they were living peaceful one with another, and so they were also at war with one another against Esau, okay? Not war like fighting against one another, I mean together with one another against Esau, right? So let's go back. So it says, unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, okay? So I should have it here. I think so. I don't think I need this. Here it is, yep. So when you go over here to the wiki, right, you get the Seminole Wars. It says the Seminole Wars, also known as the Florida Wars, were a series of 3 military conflicts between the United States and the Seminoles. Now, for those of you, because some every now and then, all right, because this is learning, all right, and we should understand these things. Speaking to myself first and foremost, okay, this ain't going to be the hyperactive lesson, okay, because this portion here, we're definitely about to go into, no, we're not going to go into like every single thing, but we're just going to pull out these topics and talk about them, all right? Understand these 3 wars, on a basic level, and the things that were transpiring, all right? Because this is all part of that prophecy that we're reading about, okay? So it says, uh, 3 military conflicts between the United States and the Seminoles, right? The Reubenites, right? That took place in Florida between 1816 and 1858. It says the Seminoles are a Native American nation which coalesced in northern Florida during the early 1700s when the territory was still a Spanish colonial possession. Tensions grew between the Seminoles and American settlers in the newly independent United States in the early 1800s. Because remember, those colonizers came over here and began with the 13 colonies, which that's also Esau's history, which is also in the scriptures. But these colonizers that came here wanted their independence from Britain because they saw this land, how they can do what they can do, and how they can build up, and they were like, to hell with England and the monarchy there, or however you want to put it. All right, we can just stay here. All right, and so they fought the wars against them. All right, getting their independence from back east. Okay, and then they're establishing the 13 colonies. All right, so on and so forth. And they pretty much enslaved the tribes, all right, and had them work and build up for them. We built America, okay? So it says tensions grew between the Seminoles and American settlers in the newly independent United States in the early 1800s, mainly because enslaved people regularly fled from Georgia into Spanish Florida. And those enslaved people were the tribe of Judah, as we just read about. All right. Prompting slave owners to conduct slave raids across the border, a series of cross-border skirmishes escalated into the First Seminole War. So Esau, trying to come and recapture Judah that was fleeing from slavery, all right, hiding out with Reuben, as we just went across that information, right? And this is what sparked the First Seminole Wars, all right? So, First Seminole War, when American General Andrew Jackson, now we know about this double, right? Because that goes on as we move on later into this chapter, all right, speaking about the tribe of Gad, okay, and the Trail of Tears and all that history. So his name is definitely going to pop up again, all right. Everyone should be familiar with that demon, okay. When American General Andrew Jackson led an incursion into the territory over Spanish objections, Jackson's forces destroyed several Seminole, Miccosukee, and Black Seminole towns, all right. We just talked about Black Seminole, right? Black Seminoles or Afro Seminoles are an ethnic group of mixed Native American and African origin. Now, there's no such thing as mixed, but what we did have is Judite men having Seminole, or I'm sorry, Reubenite women as wives, all right, and having children, okay. But it says associated with the Seminole people in Florida and Oklahoma. They are mostly blood descendants of the Seminole people, free Africans, and escaped former slaves. So that's another thing they try to trip you. We're not Africans, all right? We weren't free Africans, free Judites, if anything, okay? But it says an escaped former slaves, all right, which is what we just talked about, and we're still on that topic, who allied with Seminole groups in Spanish Florida. Many have Seminole lineage, but due to the stigma of having mixed origin, they have all been categorized as slaves or free men in the past. All right. And that's what they like to do. Esau likes to lump us together and give us a false name. Okay. Because they can't tell us apart sometimes. So they like to give us this false name and state false claims and so on and so forth. Okay. So, yeah. And that goes, give you further credence about us living together peacefully. All right. One another. All right. And against Esau. All right. So, yeah. And so you see right here, dude smoking a pipe right there. Oklahoma, Florida, Texas. Also says the Bahamas, Andros Islands, Mexico, Coahuila. Languages: English, Afro-Seminole, Creole, Spanish. All right. So yeah, and you can read more on this yourself. A lot of little distant information in there. Okay, but we're gonna actually go back. Wait. Okay, yes, that's more. It speaks about Oklahoma and stuff like that. So yeah, you can actually read that. It's very good to read there. Okay. Um. Yeah, definitely read that. So we go back here. It says, as well as captured Fort San Marcos and briefly occupied Pensacola before withdrawing in 1818. The U.S. and Spain soon negotiated the transfer of the territory, which with the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819, which was a faulty treaty. Okay, because they took that and because some of those Seminoles were so-called Seminoles or Reubenites were gullible, and because not all of them were okay with Esau's treaties and stuff like that. Like, this is the deal. No, we're not with that. Forget what you're talking about. But some of them were gullible and signed the treaty. And so what they did, they turned around and took the signing of that treaty by a few and painted the broad stroke that all of y'all are in agreement, and to try to that was their attempts to push everybody out of the land. So Esau's wicked, okay, but that's the devil for you, okay. So it says Adams-Onis Treaty, also known as the Transcontinental Treaty, the Spanish Cession, the Florida Purchase Treaty, or the Florida Treaty, was a treaty between the United States and Spain in 1819 that ceded Florida to the U.S., all right, and defined the boundary between the U.S. and Mexico, or so-called New Spain, all right. So that's also history dealing with Issachar, okay. But yeah, so it says, ceded Florida to the U.S., okay, because they were trying to hold on to that territory, Esau versus Esau, all right. So it says, it settled a standing border dispute between the two countries and was considered a triumph of American diplomacy. It came during the successful Spanish-American Wars of Independence against Spain. That's what we just talked about. Because it speaks about this in the scriptures, right? Those revolutionary wars that were fought, all right? The French, the Spanish, and the British, all right? And in particular, as we just mentioned, the Spanish War, okay? So it says the successful Spanish-American Wars of Independence against Spain, all right? So you had Edomites versus Edomites, and as always, in a lot of our history, the Israelites will always be caught up in somebody else's mess, okay? Sometimes it will be directly because of us, other times because we're just caught up in other people's bull, okay? Bull crap. But this is all, you know, that history there. So you see here what they call New Spain, all right? Mexico, all right? That it originally belonged to, all right, the tribe of Issachar, all right? That particular area there. And it became part of the United States, all right, of America, all right? Let's get this paragraph at least. Let's see, it says a border here. Okay, you can read that as well. It says Florida had become a burden to Spain, which could not afford to send settlers or staff garrisons. So Madrid decided to cede the territory to the United States in exchange for settling the boundary dispute along the Sabine River in Spanish Texas. The treaty established the boundary of U.S. territory and claims through the Rocky Mountains and west to the Pacific Ocean, in exchange for Washington paying residents claims against the Spanish government up to a total of $5 million, 5 million Spanish dollars, that is, purchasing power equivalent to 102,700,000 US dollars in 2024, and relinquishing the U.S. claims on parts of Spanish Texas west of the Sabine River and other Spanish areas under the terms of the Louisiana Purchase, which is another thing, all right, that's important to understand. The Louisiana Purchase, all right, Vente de la Louisiana, sale of Louisiana, was the acquisition of the territory of Louisiana by the United States. And this is so wicked when you really think about it. It's really demonic, because when you miss educational school systems, they teach you about the Louisiana Purchase, man. They teach you this in school, and it's looked at, as Esau's great history, and then those so-called native tribes were some barbarian people. You fucking wicked, man. Salakia, man. But man, come on, man. But it pisses you off though, because they actually teach you this in school, man. Okay. It says, from the French First Republic in 1803, this consisted of most of the land in the Mississippi River's damaged basin west of the river. In return for $15 million, or approximately $18 per square mile, the United States nominally acquired a total of 828,000 square miles, all right, of acres now in the central United States. However, France only controlled a small fraction of this area, most of which was inhabited by Native Americans. All right, Gad and Reuben. All right, it says effectively, for the majority of the area, the United States brought the preemptive right to obtain Indian lands by treaty or by conquest, to the exclusion of other colonial powers. All right, and you can go and research more on this. Okay, Louisiana Purchase. Right. So it says modern map of the United States overlapped with territory bought in the Louisiana Purchase in white, which is, man, a vast area. And there's the Oklahoma right there, right? And in Texas, Colorado, Dakota, okay? These are places where you have heavily found, those particular tribes, man, right? But going back to Reuben, the so-called Seminoles of Florida, all right? Seminole Wars, okay? Let's go down here, because I do read all of that. Yeah. So locate date 1816, 1858. Location Spanish Florida, Florida Territory, Florida. Result: most Seminoles were removed from Florida. A few small bands remain. Okay. Belligerent Seminole, Yuchi, Choctaw, Black Seminoles. All right. And as you see there in purple, because I looked into all these different names here on my own time. All right. I'm not going to do this on screen, but you can see that I looked into every last one of these because they were supposed to be blue. All right. Now I'll prove that point right here. We're going to punch on Duncan Clinch. All right. You see that devil? And bam, now it comes up what? Purple. All right. So, yeah. So, I looked into all these on my own time, but not on screen. All right. So, those different names there they were able to click on. So, going down here, I want to find, Do we want to read all of that? Oh, here we go. Yep, first Seminole. Yeah, they're all down there. So we can get them all in a scoop. So let's read this. So this kind of be like an overview to when we go down. So the United States gained possession of Florida in 1821 and coerced the Seminoles into leaving their lands in the Florida Panhandle for a large Indian reservation in the center of the peninsula, per the Treaty of Moultrie Creek. In 1832, by the Treaty of Payne's Landing. All right. However, the federal government under the United States President Andrew Jackson demanded that they leave Florida altogether and relocate to Indian Territory, modern-day Oklahoma, as per the Indian Removal Act of 1830. All right. And I'm curious of what these places are that pop up. Moultrie Creek, also known as Treaty of Florida. I'm just trying to find out where it is. Treaty of Payne's Landing. Okay, okay, yep. So the Moultrie Creek, all right, a central area in Florida, all right, is where they were pushed and centralized to. And same thing, I guess, here at Payne's Landing. All right, so yeah. So, and the Indian Removal Act is another thing we can talk about. We may do it in a separate lesson because, you know, that has to do with the so-called native tribes as well. All right. So yeah, you can read that on your own time if you like. That's very important to talk about. Right, the Indian Removal Act of the 1800s. All right, Andrew Jackson, you know, Trail of Tears and all that history there. So it says those who refused to move resisted violently, leading to the Second Seminole War. All right, so this is everything we're going to read down below. So the First Seminole War was sparked by Judah, all right, fleeing from, you know, slavery, all right, and it's possible that some of those were considered free, okay, but you know, Esau being the devil, right? Nobody's seen as free to him, okay. They're all my property, right? Okay. And so those you know, Judites, which I believe it said most of them come from Georgia, all right, were fleeing down to, you know, this so-called Spanish Florida and linking up with Reuben down there, all right, and Esau pursuing them. Okay, it would spark the First Seminole War, and now you have the Second Seminole War being sparked by Andrew Jackson because you know, like we just mentioned, they were pushed to this central area in Central Florida, and then Andrew Jackson came up with the idea that, hey, no, they all got to move, all right, they all got to leave, and that's what sparked the Second Seminole War. So, you know, I hope that was basic. A little will you be edified by this lesson, because this will probably be one of the more longer ones, all right, because there's a lot to talk about here. Or maybe like when you go on to talk about Joseph, all right, this tribe there. Those are longer lessons. Like some of these are very short, you know, straight to the point, some of these tribes. But some of them have more history, and, you know, a little bit more history behind them to talk about. So it says, those who refused to move resisted violently, all right, leading to the Second Seminole War, 1835 to 1842, which was by far the longest and most wide-ranging of the three conflicts. Initially, less than 2,000 Seminole warriors employed hit and run. There it is right there, guerrilla warfare tactics, because we talked about this earlier, warrior race of people, and they were utilizing guerrilla warfare against Esau, whipping their asses. All right, guerrilla warfare is a form of unconventional warfare. See, they call it unconventional, right? Whatever. Unconventional warfare, in which small groups of irregular military, such as rebels, partisans, paramilitary personnel, or armed civilians, which may include recruited children, use ambushes, sabotage, terrorism, raids, petty warfare, or hit-and-run tactics in a rebellion, in a violent conflict, in a war, or in a civil war to fight against regular military, police, or rival insurgent forces. So they try to word it a certain way, all right, because of how they got whipped up by it. But then they took it and started utilizing it for themselves. Esau, man. So yeah, although the term guerrilla warfare was coined in the context of the Peninsular War in the 19th century, the tactical methods of guerrilla warfare have long been in use. Okay, so it says, yep, guerrilla warfare tactics and knowledge of the land to evade and frustrate a combined U.S. Army and Marine force that grew to over 30,000. Yeah, because when you go down to Florida, right, you get a lot of, you know, swamp areas and things of that nature, and because you know, Reuben was living there. They knew the land, all right. They knew what they were doing. They knew the land. They knew the area, you know, everything they needed to know, all right. And Esau wasn't familiar with it, and so that, alongside of the guerrilla warfare, the guerrilla tactics, Esau stood no match for them, okay? But of course, prophecy had to sit in. It says, instead of continuing to pursue these small bands, American commanders eventually changed their strategy and focused on seeking out and destroying hidden Seminole villages and crops. And we talked about that earlier, right? See, severing out, you know, innocent neighborhoods, settlements, right? and attacking them, right, like cowards, like because that's also in the scriptures, dealing with Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to thee in the way, all right? As we were fleeing and running away, they were killing the men, the elderly, the women, the children, the babies and stuff that were in the rear. Hey, man. Hey, the Lord got something serious for these devils, man. Okay? Something extra serious, man. All right? More than all the heathen nations, man. He's got something extra special for Esau, man. So it says, but you see, this is a natural thing with them. All right? They were given a great sword to take peace from the earth that they should kill one another. But they also used that sword against us, man. Very heavily against us. All right? Believe it or not, that's not a motorcycle. That's actually a BMW, man. These people in their fancy cars, right? It says the American commanders eventually changed their strategy and focused on seeking out and destroying hidden Seminole villages and crops, putting increasing pressure on resistors to surrender or starve with their families. You see? By 1842, 3,612 Seminoles had relocated to the Indian Territory. A minority of about 350 to 500 remained in Florida, where they were allowed to remain in an uneasy truce. Tensions over a new settlement in the state under the Armed Occupation Act of 1842, south of Tampa, led to renewed hostilities, and the Third Seminole War broke out in 1855. By the cessation of active fighting in 1858, the few remaining bands of Seminoles in Florida had fled deep into the Everglades to land unwanted by American settlers. Taken together, the Seminole Wars were the longest, most expensive, and most deadly of all American Indian wars. Right? And here's those, First Seminole War right there. East Florida, east side of Apalachicola River. Jackson gathered his forces at Fort Scott in March 1818, including 800 U.S. Army regulars, 1,000 Tennessee volunteers, 1,000 Georgia militia, and about 1,400 friendly Lower Creek warriors. And then we just mentioned that Esau make it seem like because of his army and people, they're upright, but everything else, guerrilla warfare, all this kind of this different. Oh, these were sneaky tactics, and they were this and that, to fight against, I don't know, upstanding men. Oh, get the hell out of here, man. Devils, man. It says, yep, and about 1,400 friendly Lower Creek warriors under command of Brigadier General William McIntosh and a Creek chief. On 15th of March, Jackson's army entered Florida, marching down the banks of the Apalachicola River. When they reached the site of the Negro Fort Jackson, all right, the Negro Fort Jackson had his men, when they reached the site of the Negro Fort, Jackson had his men construct a new fort, Fort Gadsden. The army then set out for the Miccosukee villages around the Lake Miccosukee. The Indian town of Unhika, today's Tallahassee, was burned on March 31st, and the town of Miccosukee was taken the next day. More than 300 Indian homes were destroyed. Jackson then turned south, reaching Fort St. Mark's or San Marcos on April 6th. Okay, illustration of the arrest of Helis Hadjo and Hamathli Michael at St. Mark's. All right, so you see them taking them hostage, right? And there's more of that war you can read there. I don't want to read the whole thing because it's so long. I want to get on to, briefly hitting the other. What does it say down there? Yeah, you definitely have to read this on your own time, all of this, because it gives you all the back history there on everything that was transpiring, all right, from the war to the, so on and so forth. Yeah, so we pretty much just read a portion of it because there's so much to read here. All right, so we'll bring this drop down menu up and grab the Second Seminole War. All right, what's the first one? Oh, we just talked about that. Yep. So Second Seminole War. This is a woodcut from a true and authentic account of the Indian War in Florida, 1836. All right. So you see that. Okay. So it says, as Florida officials realized the Seminole would resist relocation, preparations for war began. Settlers fled to safety as Seminole attacked plantations, and a militia wagon train. 2 companies totaling 110 men under the command of Major Francis L. Dade were sent from Fort Brooke to reinforce Fort King in mid-December 1835. On the morning of December 28th, the train of troops was ambushed by a group of Seminole warriors under the command of Alligator near modern-day Bushnell, Florida. The entire command and their small cannon were destroyed, with only 2 badly wounded soldiers surviving to return to Fort Brooke. Over the next few months, Generals Clinch, Gaines, and Winfield Scott, as well as Territorial Governor Richard Keith Call, led large numbers of troops in futile pursuits of the Seminoles. In the meantime, the Seminoles struck throughout the state, attacking isolated farms, settlements, plantations, and army forts. Yeah, getting back, right? Even burning the Cape Florida lighthouse. Supply problems and a high rate of illness during the summer caused the army to abandon several forts. Yeah, getting that get back. Okay. Okay, let's get this real quick. It says Major Ethan Allen Hitchcock was among those who found the remains of the Dade party in February. In his journal, he wrote of the discovery and expressed his discontent. The government is in the wrong, and this is the chief cause of the persevering opposition of the Indians, who have nobly defended their country against our attempt to enforce a fraudulent treaty, right? The natives, because remember, they were forced in Central Florida, then they were forced out of Central Florida, all right, by command of Andrew Jackson. The natives used every means to avoid a war, but were forced. Look, the natives used every means to avoid a war, but were forced into it by the tyranny of our government. So you see, this is the devil speaking for them. On November 21st, November 1836, the Battle of Wahoo Swamp, the Seminole fought against American allied forces numbering 2,500, successfully driving them back. Successfully driving them back. Among the American dead was Major David Moniac, the first Native American graduate of West Point. The skirmish restored Seminole confidence, showing their ability to hold their ground against their old enemies of the Creek and white settlers. See? Look at this. Abraham, a black Seminole leader. All right. You can't tell if it's Reuben or Judah, right? And you got that today. All right. There's men out here today teaching, preaching on the highways, all right, who are from the tribe of Reuben, and you never know because they look like Judah, man. All right. And vice versa. Okay. So yeah, let's get this. What it says, the Negroes from the commencement of the Florida War have, for their numbers, been the most formidable foe, more bloodthirsty, active, and revengeful than the Indians. And then remember, we read Deuteronomy 33, verse 6 and 7. All right. And see how that goes all together. Okay. Judah was amongst them. All right. Brother and brother. Okay. Fighting against these colonizers, these devils here. All right. The Negro, returned to his original owner, might have remained a few days when he again would have fled to the swamps, more vindictive than ever. And that's where he was hiding out with Reuben. Okay. Oklahoma and Indian territories. You can get a quick gander at that. Pause if you have to. So it says the Negroes rule the Indians, and it is important that they should feel themselves secure. If they should become alarmed and hold out, the war will be renewed. And yeah, and so Judah started taking over some of those attacks, all right, in a sense, all right, as we just read there, okay? Judah started heading some of these attacks, all right? And we were already, farming with them, taking their women, and, not taking like just, taking away, but like, we, peacefully, all right? And other things, all right, that we already talked about before. So you see all these things coming together, all right, going through these different, historical accounts here. And this is from the wiki, which the wiki, believe it or not, the wiki actually goes off sometimes, all right? Wiki's not just because it's the Wikipedia, wiki's not always accurate. Sometimes the wiki actually goes off, believe it or not. Let's get this. Of the 500 black Seminoles who willingly surrendered, most of them were sent west to Indian Territory. And when they say these black Seminoles, they're talking about Judah. It says slaves that ran away from plantations during the war and later surrendered were likely returned to their original owners, even if they surrendered willingly. But those who refused to return to the plantation could have a Seminole native claim them and get sent west as an Indian slave. Many captured black Seminoles and runaway slaves were returned to their owners and or sold, but some were employed as interpreters. Yeah, that's the thing with Esau, right? You know, they get tired. Oh, this nigger keeps running away. I'm gonna slave you over here I'm gonna say you to the Dicky boys, right? To nasty people. They'll say you to someone nastier than themselves, all right? And they will mark you as a runaway, okay? Because no one would want you, you know, if you're always causing trouble, right? So yeah. So you know, yeah, Esau, you know, I mean, how many times can I say a devil in one lesson, man? Just a straight demon. So it says, and or so, but some were employed as interpreters and counselors who helped convince Seminole native leaders to negotiate surrender. All right. So let's go back up because I'll probably keep rolling down because you know when I'm on my own time, you know, I get deeply into these things, but I don't want to forget that we're doing, you know, a particular lesson. Actually, I just lost my spot. I want to drop down that menu. We'll just keep going down and try to find it. See, look how much is here. Here it is. The Third Seminole War. Right. So second interbellum. Peace had come to Florida. The Indians were mostly staying on the reservation. Groups of 10 or so men would visit Tampa to trade. This is basically talking about the in-between time between the wars. First war, then the time period in between, then the second war, then that's this right here, the second interbellum is the time in between the what we're about to read here, the third war. Third Seminole War. All right, increased army presence by Indian attacks. By late 1855, there were more than 700 army troops stationed on the Florida Peninsula. In fall of 1855, a group of Seminole gathered near Taylor Creek on the northeast side of Lake Okeechobee. There, it was generally agreed that they would strike back at the increasing pressure being put on them and attack when an opportunity presented itself. According to one account, a warrior named Tiger, possibly Thlocklo, Tustunugi, all right, Tom Tiger, argued in favor of military action, all right, while another leader named Chipko opposed war. On December 7, 1855, First Lieutenant George Hartsuff, who had led previous patrols into the reservation, left Fort Myers with 10 men and 2 wagons. They found no Seminoles, but did pass cornfields and 3 deserted villages, including Billy Bowleg's village. On the evening of 19th of December, Hartsuff told his men that they will be returning to Fort Myers the next day. As the men were loading the wagons and saddling their horses the next morning, December 20th, 1855, 40 Seminoles, led by Billy Bowlegs, attacked the camp. Several soldiers were shot, including Lieutenant Hartsuff, who managed to hide himself. The Seminoles killed and scalped 4 men in the camp, killed the wagon mules, looted and burned the wagons and took several horses. 7 men, 4 of them wounded, made it back to Fort Myers. All right. And just more, you know, it's just more the same, more war. All right. Of the third war. Okay. So yeah, the 3 Seminole Wars, and as we just stated there, the second was the longest and obviously most deadliest one of all those 3 wars. So there you go. All right, going into that history of the 3 Seminole Wars. All right. And as you see, the innocent party being who? Us Israelites, who always sought to live in peace, okay? Because the scripture even talk about Jacob, our forefather. Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents, all right? Now, it wasn't just meaning plain as he, you know, just chilled out and did nothing because, you know, we were people who, you know, knew about land and cattle and worked the fields and things of that nature. But you were also peaceful people, and that's what they were, all right? So you had the so-called white settlers, the Edomites coming in and trying to take over, you know, places that you had Israelites at, all right? And these things sparked conflict and wars, okay? Where they actually fought back, okay? So the scriptures are going into history. As we always speak all the time, the Bible makes you study history, okay? So when you're dealing with the tribe of Reuben, all right, that's what you were dealing with, all right? The tribe of Reuben, I said it again, Reuben, the tribe of Reuben, which in the Hebrew, RAAWABAN, all right, were the so-called Seminole Indians fighting against the so-called white settlers, the Edomites, all right? So yeah, let's get back over here. So going back to Genesis 49:1, it says, unstable as water, thou shalt not excel. All right, unstable as water, we talked about them being a nomadic people. All right, it says, thou shalt not excel. Okay, the reason why they excelled is because of, you know, the 3 Seminole Wars we just talked about. Okay, and eventually, according to prophecy, all right, Esau had to get the best of them. Okay, and so, you know, you get that history there. All right, and there's a lot more things to go into than what we went into, but that was pretty much the most basic. Okay. It says, and then the next part of this scripture tells you why they would not excel, all right? Uh, it says, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, then defilest thou it. He went up to my couch. So what this was referring to, let's actually get, put it in perspective here. Let's go get Leviticus chapter 18, verse 8. And it says, the nakedness of thy father's wife shalt thou not uncover. It is thy father's nakedness. All right. So basically, you're not supposed to lie with your father's women. All right, because your father's wife is is your mother, and then even if it's a concubine, that's still your father's we should say playground, right? Your father's playground. So you're not supposed to do that, even because right here in verse 7, the nakedness of thy father or the nakedness of thy mother shalt thou not uncover. She is thy mother; thou shalt not uncover her nakedness, even if it was like a stepmother. That's still going off. Then it says, the nakedness of thy father's wife shalt thou not uncover. It is it is thy father's nakedness. Okay, which includes your father's concubines. Okay. I don't think I have to read any more from here. That pretty much was the point on that one. So let's grab Genesis 35, this account here. And the point is in 22. We're going to start at 19. And Rachel, all right, his mother, all right, Reuben's mother, right, Rachel, died and was buried in the way to Ephrath, or Ephrath, however you will, which is Bethlehem, all right, with which Bethlehem in the Hebrew is Bayath Lacham. Bayath means house, Lacham means bread. Bayath Lacham, house of bread. All right, so if you didn't know before, there's another Hebrew word to learn there. So it says, and Jacob set a pillar upon her grave, that is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. And Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Edar. Okay, so and you go to the tower of Edar, all right, meaning tower of the flock. So it's shepherd's watchtower near Bethlehem, all right, Migdal Eder, or in the Hebrew, Magdal Ibar. Oh, I'm sorry, Idar. Magdal Ibar. I'm not, Idar. Magdal Idar, excuse me. Which Idar means flock or herd, okay, and Magdal meaning tower, all right, so that's where you get that tower of the flock, all right, so it's placed near Bethlehem, so you find out this general location here. So it says, and it came to pass, here's the point, and it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land, all right, in Edar, all right, or beyond the tower of Edar, all right, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, all right, Bilhah, okay, all right, Balha, or Balha, or Balha, all right, meaning trouble, Rachel's handmaid, whom she gave to Jacob as a concubine, mother to two of Jacob's children, Dan and Naphtali, all right. So yeah, so he slept with one of his father's, a woman that belonged to his father. So when it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob was well. All right. So and there you go. All right. So that's the scripture right there, which you can also well, I jump back too many. We're gonna get First Chronicles chapter 5, and we'll probably get a few of those translations there. We're going to read 1 and 2, genealogy from Reuben. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn. But for as much as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright, all right, because we just talked about the birthright. Oh, hold on. Buttons in the way. All right. Bakawara. Bakawara. All right. Bakawara. Birthright. Primogeniture, right of the firstborn. That's all you need right there. The right of the firstborn, because he was the very first son, Reuben, right? So it says, for he was the firstborn, but for as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph, which that's going to come up again. All right. When we talk about Joseph's sons, all right, those tribes there. All right. The son of Israel. It says, and the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. For Judah prevailed above his brethren, and of him came the chief ruler. but the birthright was Joseph's, right? Because Judah is the head tribe, all right? And, as we talk about often, the house of David, all right? So speaking about David, and the reason why I want to get some other translations is so that can be clarified for you. So First Chronicles 5:1 in the, verse 1 and 2 in the NLT, it says the oldest son of Israel was Reuben, but since he dishonored his father by sleeping with one of his father's concubines, his birthright was given to the sons of his brother Joseph. For this reason, Reuben is not listed in the genealogical records as the firstborn son. All right, so now that means that he wasn't listed in the records, but he's no longer listed in the records as the firstborn son, because the rights of the firstborn son went down to Joseph. Okay, so it says the descendants of Judah became the most powerful tribe and provided a ruler for the nation, but the birthright belonged to Joseph. Now, it's going to also expand as we go to the AMP on that verse 2, more of what we just read there. So the AMP, same scriptures. Now, we come to the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for Reuben was the eldest, but because he defiled his father's bed with Bilhah, his father's concubine, his birthright was given to Manasseh and Ephraim, the sons of Joseph, the favorite. All right, and we know Joseph is interchangeable with Ephraim. All right, the sons of Joseph, the favorite, because Joseph was the favorite son of his father, son of Israel, so that he is not enrolled in the genealogy according to the birthright, meaning being the rights of the firstborn that went to Joseph. Though Judah prevailed over his brothers, and from him came David, all right, the leader and eventually the Messiah. Talk about Yahushua because he's from that direct lineage. He's also the tribe of Judah. Matthew chapter 1 breaks it all down. Yet the birthright was Joseph, all right? And then you can read down further, talk about the sons of Reuben, okay? But that's not important for what we're going into now. So we go back over here. Are we there? Yep. So it says, unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest to thy father's bed. Then defilest thou it, he went up to my couch. So that's talking about Reuben sleeping with his father's concubine, all right, Bilhah, all right? And so because of that, the rights of the firstborn were stripped from him. They gave it to Joseph, okay? And also later on, you have history that led up to those three Seminole Wars, all right? So there you go. So that's pretty much it dealing with Reuben, okay? Basically, he was in verse 3 and 4, but we're going to read over every time we go into one of these sons, we're going to read verses 1 and 2 because it's important. So yeah, Genesis 49, verse 3 and verse 4, dealing with the tribe of Reuben, or RAAWABAN, meaning behold a son, all right, who are the so-called Seminole Indians, which that means wild or untamed, okay? So that's pretty much all I have for you. So Lord willing, you will edify. Right, to next time, I'm going to say shalom.